He arrived at Barcelona barely out of his teens with a headline-sized price tag and a locker full of unrealised expectation, and for a long stretch the story of housemaid Dembele read like a cautionary tale about talent outrunning preparation. When a club pays Euros 135 million for a 20-year-old, the moment is more than a transfer, it is a promise, a public dare to become one of the best. What followed for Dembele at Barca was not the straight ascent fans imagined. Instead came dizzying highs followed by months and sometimes years of frustration, hamstrings, setbacks, interrupted seasons, and the painful, invisible work of trying to stitch a career back together while the world kept scoring your potential on a scale of what might have been. Speaking now with the calm of someone who has been through extremes, he describes those Barcelona years as complicated, and that single word carries both the glamour of his arrival and the weight of repeated absence. The image that stands out is not of his best dribble or his fastest sprint, but of a player learning the hard lesson that raw ability is only one part of the equation at football's summit. The rest is care, routine, recovery, and an almost military discipline that injury can force upon you if you want to survive. It's important to remember the basics to understand the scale. 6 years at Barcelona, 185 competitive appearances, numbers that mean he contributed, but which also hide long stretches of enforced inactivity and adaptation. For a young man who had gone from Rennes to Dortmund, and then suddenly into a dressing room filled with the players he'd watched on TV, the transition was seismic. He admits now that arriving as a raw talent meant he leaned on natural gifts, played with energy, and didn't initially build the gym habits or recovery routine the game would later demand. After one injury, then two, then several seasons disrupted, he had no choice but to change. He learned to respect the body the way elite sport requires, measured training, preventive work, and sometimes the humility of sitting out so you're available when it truly matters. That shift, from reckless young prodigy to disciplined professional, is the real story beneath the headlines. It's what turned frustration into leadership, and what turned a career that could have splintered into one that found new value. Those lessons followed him to Paris. At PSG, he discovered that maturity can translate into impact, even when the scars of previous seasons remain visible. But football rarely pauses for reflection. It moves in fixtures, qualifiers and knockouts, and the spectre of a recent national team injury shows how fragile margins still are. With Champions League ties and high-stakes clashes looming between PSG's and his old club, any physical setback becomes a story with consequences, not just for him as an individual, but for two clubs and hundreds of thousands of fans who expect drama on the biggest night. The narrative, therefore, is double-edged. It's the personal arc of a player who learned discipline the hard way, and it's a tactical variable in matches where fitness and availability can decide outcome. When a player like Dembele, with pace, unpredictability, and those flashes of brilliance that can change a game, is fit and confident, he forces opponents to rework plans. When he's on the treatment table, teams suddenly sense an opening. But beyond tactics and ticket sales, there is a human lesson. Dembele's reflection is not a plea for sympathy. It is an honest mapping of how modern football takes an unprepared teen and turns him into a fully formed professional through a series of painful but clarifying experiences. He speaks of friendships kept, of growth off the pitch, and of gratitude for a club where he matured both as a player and a person. Those are the quieter wins that rarely trend on social feeds but matter profoundly in the long arc of a career. For viewers and fans, the takeaway is simple yet sobering. Talent draws attention, but longevity demands work. If you're watching this for drama, you'll find it in the medical room and the training ground as much as in the highlight reel. If you're watching because you love the game, you'll feel the deeper respect that comes from seeing a star rebuild himself piece by piece, habit by habit. So as the cameras refocus on the Champions League calendar, and as PSG and Barcelona inch toward another high-profile meeting, the real subplot to watch is not a single goal or a single tackle. It's the state of a player who once carried a destiny in Euros on his shoulders, who admits the journey was complicated, and who now stands as a reminder that the sport's glamour is matched by a relentless, often unseen, grind. Keep an eye on his availability, yes, but don't miss the quieter evolution, from prodigy to professional, from raw promise to something steadier. That evolution, carved out by pain, discipline and perseverance, might just define the next chapter of his career and shape the outcomes fans are already buzzing about.